Hi, everybody, and welcome. I don't know what week it is. Why do I even try? Um, welcome
Four,
to the
five?
newest edition of Lila and Naomi adventuring through 2019 and all sorts of healing stuff. And we are still on the topic of judgment. This week, hidden expectations enter the conversation, which I'm super stoked about because we've talked about expectations before, and it's always a fun conversation. So, Naomi.
It's fun in quotes. If you can't see us, because I'm calling in. Fun is in quotes in my world, just so you know.
I
yes,
might
that is a
be.
judgment.
I was going to say, I might be a little sadistic because personally, like digging through those things and then coming out on the other side and being like, I almost killed everybody in my house, but I figured this thing out. And
right?
now we're
Gold
all
price
harmonious.
Yes.
Like, that's the fun part for me. The homicide piece, not so fun, but the figuring it out part, yes.
Absolutely. On the other side is fabulous, which that's like with any of the things that we struggle with, the things that trip us up, the things that keep us from being at 100%. The other side, being on the other side of it, is amazing, astounding, joyous, breath of fresh air, full of relief, all of those things, all the great stuff. And it requires us to go through them, or as one coach that I used to follow used to say, sometimes you got to sit in your shit. Mm-hmm. And you have to be willing to dig into it, the truth of it, the icky, messy, sticky, mucky parts of it, the shadow side. You have to be willing, and I'm going to say have to, be willing to do that to get to that other side. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, the fun part isn't always the sitting in the shit part, but the after, once you've cleared it up and cleaned it up, especially if you can stay out of judgment towards yourself in doing so, it's really glorious. So, yeah, judgment and expectation. So, have you had any this week, Lila? And how did those unfold?
You're hilarious. I live with 1.5 new people, which we've talked about. It's a whole other person, but that whole other person's only there like half the time. And I am reading this. There's a reason that I'm telling you about my reading list. I'm reading this book called How to Manage Your House Without Losing Your Mind. I'm not reading it. It's reading itself to me on audiobook. And before sharing space with my enjoyable other, I realized that we are two different kinds of clean. I am sure, the laundry's all over the living room floor. Not anymore, but I was. Sure, the laundry's all over the living room floor, but I vacuumed the floor before I put it down there. It's fine. Kind of clean. And he is there's a stove under all that grease somewhere kind of person, where the laundry is put away. It's out of sight. You cannot see it. It may not be folded, but it's not all over the living room floor. But, might not have vacuumed this month. In fact, I think when I said something about like, I sent him the cleaning schedule. I was like, this is what I'm working towards. Like, it's insane, but this is what I'm working towards. And he was just like, that's a lot. I was like, this is what most of the blogs say that like cleaning should be like.
Was these are my blogs written by the OCD people?
No, like the lady that wrote the book How to Manage Your House Without Losing Your Mind is not OCD. In fact, she was like, I have slob vision. It's like if there's one sock on the floor, I don't see it. I don't see it until there's 400 socks on the floor.
Oh, yeah, I have that
Like,
vision.
for me, the blueberry sauce that is underneath the first eye on the stove, I see that. He doesn't see it until the whole stove is dripping blueberry sauce.
Got it.
And even then, he might be okay with it. But you can't leave dishes all over the kitchen for more than a couple of days before he's like, clean things or throw it all away. So it's very interesting that we have different ideas of clean. And this will be fun for you and I to dig into together at like a different time. But what I realized this week is that he, like, a couple of days is it for the dishes. Like, I'm not sure what's it for the stove, but a couple of days is it for the dishes. And if I ask, he'll be like, oh, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And I'm like, oh, okay. But my experience with people that I share space with, which is why when we ended last year in the adventure and asking, and I was like, I'm asking at a different level this year. Part of that is because my experience in asking is intimate asking usually ends in disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
So why ask? So that's a new muscle that I get to flex. So like how to ask, actually ask, not be a bitch, not be passive aggressive about it, not be stabby.
And let go the expectation that you will be disappointed.
Let go of all of the expectation. The expectation that I'll be disappointed, as well as the expectation that just because I asked, the answer is going to be yes. Or even if the answer is yes, it's in the timeline that I desire or expect, because that's also a thing.
Mm-hmm.
My ex-husband would be like, why are you doing that? I said I was going to do it. I'm like, that was 4 months ago. I'm doing it because I need plates to eat off of, genius. So, yeah.
Well, and sometimes expectations can happen, like you're talking about, in close quarters with those people who are closest to us.
Mm-hmm.
And it can happen randomly with people we don't deal with all the time, or with businesses, or with it's a fun place. Like you said, this is where it can be a fun place to explore if you're not in a stabby mood, or if it's not one that really, for whatever reason, is your particular irritating trigger that makes you grit your teeth and want to stab people. It can be things like cleaning. It can be things like, for me, and usually if there's an expectation, if there's an expectation that we have that's hidden, typically it has some relationship to a value that we hold dear to, has been my experience. So if people get triggered, or if they have an expectation, and somebody does something that's counter to that expectation, whether it's communicated or not communicated, and I think it's those uncommunicated ones.
Yeah.
That are, it's one thing if you say, oh, enjoyable other, would you please, when you're done with the dishes, rinse them and put them in the dishwasher? And he says, why, yes, my darling hoodie-wearing woman, I will, of course, do that. And then he doesn't. Okay, that's been an agreement, and the expectation is there that he follows through with what he says, and okay, then you get pissed. So that's a communicated expectation. But so often these expectations, it's like, well, what do you mean you don't do X, Y, or Z? I've had clients who it's like, well, people should just live like this, and they map it out, and it's like, okay, so that's your reality, the world according to you.
Yes.
And not everybody processes information the same way. Not everybody holds the same values. And I know for me, that would feel like I'm now stuck in a box, because that would not ever work for me, even though to you it makes the most sense in the world.
Yeah.
So we live in this map of reality. And so what happens when all of a sudden you have, because my guess is the cleaning one for you has come to light quite a bit over the past few months since you moved in together.
Yeah, I haven't shared space with another human in 4 years, 5 years, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's new.
Yeah. And it's such a great time. No offense to you or anybody else who's in your relationship isn't, even though you're newly living together, it's not a brand new relationship.
Right.
But it's a whole new ball game of the relationship.
It's a very new dynamic, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And we had it when I moved in here. And living in someone else's space, you're brought up with different values. You've created different values for yourself as you've gotten older and worked through crap, you know. We all have a way of doing things. And now here comes this other person who, while we might have my half side and I have a lot of values in common. And then we have some that it's just like, who are you? Do I even know you?
That is hilarious.
You know, and we've been married for 6 years, and still sometimes things will show up. And it's a great place to explore when it comes to relationships, since that's where you started the conversation. It's a great place to explore. Do I have, and I think we talked about this 2 calls ago, what definition do we have? Do I have this definition in my head of what does it mean to be a good wife? What does it mean to be a good partner? What does it mean to be, and that came up actually in the context of business this week. A friend of mine, so those of you who don't know me well and you don't see me right now, to paint a picture, I network locally a lot. I like to think I look professional, but I look my version of professional. I'm a coach. I'm a former personal trainer. I like comfortable clothes. I don't like to have to iron a single thing. I'm not a suit wearing kind of girl. I left those days a long time ago in corporate America. So I showed up at a networking event one day and talked to this gal, and at first she was like, oh my God, I almost didn't recognize you. You don't have flowy pants on. I don't think I've ever seen you in something other than flowy pants. I was like, wow. Okay, I do like my flowy pants. Maybe that's more my brand than I realized, you know. And someone else, I wore a dress one day. I wear skirts a lot. Well, maybe not a lot, but I do wear skirts and big flowy pants. I happened to wear a dress one day, and she's like, oh my God, you're in a dress. Okay. So I have my own brand. The reason I paint that picture is I have my own version. I still always, you know, it's not like I show up with my hair in curlers and wear, you know, ripped pants. Okay, I realize ripped jeans are in, but, you know, pants that are worn out. I'm not showing up looking like I've just rolled out of bed, or even that I've just come from the gym. And so I look, my idea of professional. I'm talking to this person, and she's got a very defined version of what a professional speaker ought to look like. And there's someone else who's getting into the speaker circuit around here, and now suddenly, and they're not in an industry that requires suits at all, and they've suddenly started showing up to everything wearing a suit jacket. because that looks the part.
Mhm.
And just this week, come to find out that a group of professionals totally dismissed an individual because of the color of their hair and their
Mhm.
age, because they didn't see that individual as being professional enough. And I'm like, wow, you guys lost out, because that is one smart cookie, and you could learn a lot from her.
Mhm.
So we have these expectations, these definitions sometimes of how people should show up, who they should be, or the actions they should take. So from what you're saying, part of it is the actions, what you're taking action on or not taking action on because of what does or doesn't bother you. And in a
Yeah.
living situation, you definitely want to define what are those expectations for yourself and where do you compromise.
Yep, that's been that's been the conversation.
So what have you done to resolve it so you stay out of judgy pantsness, so you stay off that high unicorn?
The unicorn and I cuddled on the couch. We ate some popcorn. We talked about it. And um what's unique about our relationship is I go within first. I am very aware that he wants me happy. And so if I am not happy, then kind of it's on me, like, for lack of a more eloquent way of putting it. So I go with, like, anytime I'm upset with him, I go within and make sure I'm not triggered and make sure I'm, like, actually legitimately upset. Like, what? And when it comes to home stuff, what I realize is my discomfort with and sometimes refusal to ask things, um, and working on that and just being willing to ask and kind of figuring out how to use my voice at home. Um, the trauma comes from my relationship with my mother and my relationship with my first husband. So doing a lot of healing around those traumas and then learning new ways of being in intimate relationships. So yeah, that's
I think we can even do that in non-intimate relationships, right?
yeah. I feel like, I might not be better at it in non-intimate relationships. I'm looking at this and I'm like, I am better. No, I just cut people off.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that I see three topics kind of converging that we can then take and unravel them in three different directions two different directions on other calls. And one has to do with, and part of what we talked about as being part of this year's journey is the whole extreme boundary setting. The cutting people off I think that would be a great follow-up conversation to this. Because what do those expectations create then? If we have expectations that we're not acknowledging, are they causing strife? Do they bite us in the butt? The one that showed up for me today as I was walking back from sticking the laundry in, because of course I get all in my head and start overanalyzing everything and looking at things and pulling them apart, is I recognize when it comes to local networking relationships, I have an expectation of people being as committed to the process as I see myself being. I have an expectation of loyalty, the way I define it.
That
and
is
people don't
deep.
Right. And if they don't live up to that, oh, I put my judgy pants on and I crawl up on that unicorn like you would not believe.
Mm-hmm.
And that causes rifts in relationships. It sometimes cuts my nose off to spite my face. Because that's when you say, oh, I'm just done with people. That's the approach I take. I even told my house side, well, I will never refer anybody to that person again. When if I step back and I look at it, it's like, oh my God, is what they did this horrible thing? No. They made a business decision that I thought was dumb based on my value system, based on my world. So it's a great place to look at where are my expectations. I don't want to say valid, because I think they're always a valid thing to look at. Have they been communicated? Have they been agreed on by the other person? Is it causing me angst? And is there something I need to clean up? Or is it just something I need to process and let go? Because when I say clean up, I mean with that other person.
Yeah.
So what expectations are lurking that we haven't looked at? And does it differ for you, people who are listening, dear audience? Does it differ for you if it's an intimate relationship versus a business relationship versus a casual friend?
Yeah, I got more work to do.
I know. Because I would love to show up tomorrow to all. I've got a day of networking. I would love to show up tomorrow with my judgy pants left in my drawer. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good intention to set for sure.
I'm over here thinking, and this could also be a future conversation for sure. But I'm over here thinking about just like how comfortable I am with this method of operating. And who knows what who knows what my relationships would be like if I had fired a friend several years ago. I'm going to say like 7 or 8 years ago. Because 3 separate incidents, not related to each other, but 3 separate experiences where I felt like I wasn't emotionally safe with her. And so I just pulled back. I did not cut her off completely, specifically because our boys, we have 2 boys that are the same age, and those boys were super close. We were same building neighbors, like literally right next door to each other for 18 months. And so I wanted to maintain their friendship. And so I maintained a relationship with her, but I was not sharing at all anymore. It was very casual with her. And that is a friendship when it felt good that I look for when I look for other friendships. That was everything that I prayed for in a friendship. And so when it showed up, I was like through the roof and over the moon, and oh my God, yes. And so I'm wondering, would it have been better for me to say to her, hey, when you do this, I feel this way, and given her an opportunity to save our friendship. Because even years after, I decided to her because I saw a couple of coworkers sort of going through what she went through with me, which was her constantly reaching out and me giving her like a cookie instead of like a whole meal. I'm like, oh, we should get the boys together. And she's all like, oh, let me share my whole life with you. And my response is, that's great. We should get the boys together. And so I wonder, you know, if that friendship could have been preserved, if it should have been preserved, but I gave it no opportunity. I was like, oh, you are that person. This is the box that you have put yourself in. I'm going to leave you in that box. I'm going to take my trust and I'm going to bring it back over here. And we are just going to be casual, superficial relationship going forward. But even at that point where I apologized to her for just not explaining to her how things had gone down, she still didn't understand. Like, she thought I was upset with her for something entirely different. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, that was not clear communication, was it?
And my guess is if it happened today, you would handle it differently because you're so very different from 7 years ago.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah.
And that's, it's such a perfect illustration. Somebody does something that doesn't work for me at all, or leaves me feeling unsafe, or doesn't fit into my definition of what a good friend would do or be. If they are already, third layer out as far as like barely an acquaintance friend, I'm probably not going to say something. Because it may or may not really be worth my time. And it may or may not really, it might depend on how much of an, what kind of an issue it is. But if it's somebody that I consider a friend, it allows for more gray, and I think allows for more growth on both our parts if I were to say something. If for some reason, I'm going to use you as an example just because we're on the phone and for illustration purposes it will help. If you did something, I have a hard time picturing this, but say you did something that I thought was real jackassish of you, or even minorly jackassish, and it was like, oh, I don't know that I trust Lila now. She might do that again. Well, say you posted something on Facebook about a conversation we had that to you was just kind of, an interesting and aha light bulby kind of conversation. And all of a sudden I'm all, Lila, why are you airing all of our stuff on social media? Because you just thought it was an amazing aha light bulby kind of conversation, whereas I'm like, that was private. So I could just be like, oh, I will never tell Lila anything again. Or I can go to Lila and say, look, that didn't work for me. So next time if there's an aha light bulby thing, can you either leave my name out or can you ask first? Because I don't know that I'm 100% comfortable with that. It's up to me to say something. If I don't and I just write you off, it goes back to, am I throwing the baby out with the bathwater kind of a thing?
Yeah.
And am I giving you a chance, like you were saying about your friend? Are you giving the friendship a chance? Are you giving that person a chance to grow and do things different? Now, they may just be like, well, you're whack for thinking that that's a thing. That's all on you, and I'm not going to change my behavior. Which, if that's the case, that's when you get to choose, well, you know what? Maybe this person has moved from the inner circle to the outer circle number 3. We get to choose where we put people friendship-wise, for sure. But yeah, what if and I've been on the receiving end of that, where I apparently did something that pissed someone off, and all my other friends knew about it but me, because this person told all of them but not me. And I still am like, I still don't really know what I did. I'm like, okay. You know, so it doesn't give that person a chance, not to make excuses, but it doesn't give that person a chance to make things right, or even if all it is apologize for upsetting you.
Yeah.
I didn't know that would be a big deal, because to me it's not. Yeah. It's not fun, is it?
It is not. It is also, in this instance, it was baffling. And then once I found out what it was amusing. Yeah. It was very obvious that, like, okay. We were clearly having two separate perspectives on the same experience. Mm-hmm. But this also, like, I can only imagine if this were a closer friend. Like, this was high school, and this was somebody that I hung out with a lot and that I had an affinity for, because of our group. She was the person that we all felt like we had to protect her. And I got cut off for being protective. And I wasn't told that I got cut off either. I was just cut off.
Strangely cut off, yeah.
Yeah, I was, ran into another mutual friend years and years later, and was told, oh, yeah, she stopped talking to you because you did this thing one night. And I was like, oh, that is hilarious. That's sad.
So she had an expectation and a definition of whatever it was you did equaled a deal breaker.
Yeah.
And nobody told you deal breaker. Nobody gave you a chance to be like, oh, well, I just won't do deal breaker again. So expectations, that's an extreme view of how expectations can end relationships. Expectations, when uncommunicated or unexplored, like this one that showed up today as I was walking back, I'm like, oh man, if people don't do loyalty the way I think loyalty needs to be done, my Leo comes out, and Leo's all about being loyal, and So, and I know loyalty is important to me, but I didn't recognize to what depth. And so, yes, that can ruin relationships. It can block business partners. It can block, business relationships. It can block energy flow. It can really muck up a lot of stuff if we're unaware of what our expectations are, if we haven't defined these things. I know that's a conversation we did have. So defining them so that we can then create better communication, create space for people that allows people to be who they are, while still setting, and this is where I think that spin-off needs to happen into a different conversation, where we can still create our boundaries in a way that still respects the other person's. Because if it respects the other person's, then the judgment isn't present.
I agree. I just lost a fight with my shoe.
So what expectation did you have of your shoe?
I expected my shoe not to bite me, and it did.
A pretty good place to segue into what will be next week's call, and start focusing on then taking judgment and the boundary setting once you've let go of the judgment, or boundary setting and judgment, and how they get entangled could be another.
Boundaries could be the whole year. Let's be honest. yes, we could absolutely talk about boundaries and judgment. We'll just keep talking about judgment until there's no judgment left.
That's a pretty good thing. That's a good goal to have.
No judgment?
Yeah. Although we're just little assessment creators as two-leggeds. I don't know that anybody's fully ever reaches that level. But if you can reach the level where you recognize them and can let them go and don't let them rule your life,
that's the goal.
So maybe that's the question I think I have for the people listening is what is your relationship with judgment? You know, what are you wanting to let go of? What role do you want it to play in your life? And how does judgment differ from discernment for you?
That's a really yummy conversation.
Yeah, I think that one's going to be wrapped up in some of the boundary conversation as well. So to be continued, but chew on that.
Love it.
Any parting words from you?
No.
Okay.
I have snorty, smarty pants parting words. I'll keep them.
All right, then. Until next time, people in the future?
Yes, we will be here again next week, but not at the same time, but on the same channel.